Hello, and thanks for joining us today for this ITProTV webinar. Have a question? Use the GoToWebinar question box throughout the webinar, and we will answer as many as we can at the end. You will receive a link to a recording of the webinar delivered to your inbox. Now let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the ITProTV Webinar Series live from the ITProTV studios. I'm your moderator for today, Peter Van Rysdam, and I'm here with John Hammond, today's presenter, and Daniel Lowry, your host. Now, John is a cybersecurity researcher at Huntress and runs a very popular YouTube channel covering all things security. He holds several certifications and recently just earned his OSED. And Daniel is ITProTV's resident cybersecurity expert, teaching topics like pen testing, OWASP Top 10, and Linux shell scripting, among many others. If you like what you see here today, you'll be happy to hear that this is the format for all the ITProTV courses. So what exactly is ITProTV? It's a place to watch and learn. We offer an engaging way to learn and grow your career. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned IT pro, we've got the courses to meet your needs. CompTIA, Cisco, Linux, Apple, Microsoft, security, cloud, service management, and more, all online, all on demand. So check us out at itpro.tv. All right, we want to hear from you today, so you're encouraged to ask questions. If you send in a question, you'll be entered to win an ITProTV t-shirt. Now, if you're watching on GoToWebinar, put your question in the questions panel. LinkedIn Live viewers, put your questions in the chat. And if you're watching on the ITProTV live stream, first, thanks for being a member. You can put your questions in the chat as well. All right, Daniel and John, let's get started with today's topic, dissecting malware.
And John, I've definitely been looking forward to doing this webinar with you because, well, we had so much fun in the last webinar that we did. I figured, hey, what the heck, let's get John back in here. And John was like, hey, what the heck, let me get back in there and have some more fun, because I know you do this a lot on your YouTube channel, and it is captivating to watch you work your way through through different pieces of malware that you have and show us how the heck this stuff works and how do you figure out what is it doing. So really excited to have you today, man.
Thanks so much, Daniel. I'm super excited to be here with you. I agree. We had a ton of fun in the last webinar, and hopefully we'll have even more fun for this one. So, hey, I'm super excited. This is going to be like a demonstration-driven presentation. It's going to get nerdy. It's going to get technical. We'll light off some fireworks, do some cook and show magic. It should be a ton of fun. So, what do you think, Daniel? Can we get started?
I say we make ourselves get deep into nerd nirvana and watch you start doing this. I do want to ask one question before we get started, which is, where do you get this malware from? How do you get your hands on this stuff so that you can do these types of things like what you're doing today?
That's a super good question, and I get asked a lot. So I'll have to be honest, right, with a disclaimer. The company that I work for my day job, I work at Huntress, and Huntress is a managed threat detection and like software as a service company. So we're looking for hackers. We're looking for the bad guys. We're looking for the threat actors and the malware that they might use to maintain access on a target or victim computer. Doing that, you run into a lot of strange and funky stuff. I started to showcase this. I wanted to, bring it to the world, shine the spotlight on this sort of thing. And it's funny now that I have individuals that will just send me some weird programs that they find. It's I've actually ended up saying many times before, send me malware, just give it to me.
You got the hackers out there trying to slide it in all stealthily, and John's just like, I've got an inbox called John's Malware at protonmail.com or whatever. Just throw it in there. Yeah. Well, good to know.
For other resources, sorry, I don't mean to stomp on you, but in case any other individuals are interested in this sort of thing, if you don't have a constant stream of people sending you malware, you can track a lot of it down online if you do some due diligence in Googling. There are sites, VX Underground, that shares a lot of really incredible samples. The Zoo on GitHub has a plethora, and the Malware Bazaar, BAZAAR, hosts a lot of good, interesting samples. And you've got with that another, I'm trying to think of one more. I'm trying to think of another good one for you. Oh, using some online debuggers, or not debuggers is not the right word, but malware sandboxes like any.run, or even seeing some stuff from VirusTotal if you're willing to kind of pay an arm and a leg to get the pro paid subscription for VirusTotal. You can download whatever you want which is crazy, but really cool for learning, really cool for research. So I'd totally recommend it.
Yeah, I was familiar with the zoo, but the bazaar I was not familiar with. So I definitely want to check that out myself and start maybe playing around with this my own self. It's always good to diversify your skill sets, and you definitely have a diverse set of skills. So we're looking forward to learning from you today. I say we go ahead, and now that we have that out of the way, let's get started.
Cool. So hey, before we dive in, let me add a disclaimer that yeah, we had the conversation. We don't want to use any slides because we want to make this cool. We want to make this nerdy. We're going to get to the meat of it. With that said, it's probably going to be tech heavy, a lot of code, but bear with me. There should be some stuff to learn, and we're not going to be diving into hardcore compiled binary or program that we might need to reverse engineer, like in Ghidra or IDA or Binary Ninja or R2 or other tools like that. For the sake of our learning, for the audience and everyone, we'll stick with some scripting languages, some native code that might end up running on a victim computer. Sometimes that can be PowerShell. Sometimes that can be just regular like batch scripting, cmd.exe, and the DOS commands that could run there, old school, or Visual Basic Script, or JScript, or Windows dialect of JavaScript, right? Plenty of stuff, but I think in our case we'll work with PowerShell. Do you use PowerShell all that much over there, Daniel?
I've had to use it more and more, obviously, because it just becomes, as you're starting to exploit into Windows systems, you need to be able to make it do stuff. And PowerShell is obviously does live up to its name as far as power goes. So I'm not a PowerShell person per se. I need to get better at that. I've always said that. I just haven't had the time. There's so much to do and so little time to do it. But it's definitely on my roadmap to get better at doing PowerShell. Right now, I'm just trying to be proficient in Python and Bash, to be honest with you. But I know that it's something that I can't overlook as far as a skill set. I'm familiar with it, though.
Cool. Well, we'll take a look at it from the offensive point of view, I suppose. I'm going to end up bringing in some virtual machines over on my screen share here. I will be working in a virtual machine, and I can't harp on this enough. If you know that you're working with dangerous code, malware samples, you want to make sure you have a dedicated sandbox and environment that you can safely play in. If I actually invoke the program or run the binary, run the malware, hey, I want to make sure that I'm going to remove the network adapters or make sure it doesn't have internet connectivity. If I try to work with live and legitimate external websites that maybe malware is going to call in and out or called back down from, I will make sure I'm in a VPN or I have other security precautions in place. So if you're playing along at home, I would totally recommend the same. With that said, I'll just kind of refresh our memory here in a Windows virtual machine. I have PowerShell up and running as you would normally expect you to use PowerShell or kind of the Windows command prompt there. But we'll dive into our actual sample here, and I'm going to analyze that on Remnux, which is a Linux distribution dedicated and like fine-tuned and purposed for reverse engineering malware and other analysis. I really love Linux. You'll see me all the time in Ubuntu or in Kali or in anything, but between Remnux being a Linux variant and Flare for this sort of work, I think some other folks might know of the Flare VM, another Windows alternative for doing this sort of work. These are great dedicated toolkits for you to use, and I want to make sure that I can be in that environment. Have you heard of Remnux, or do you use it all that much before, Daniel?
I haven't used it, but I'm definitely aware of it. Just as far as like if you want to do malware analysis, it's a great distribution for performing that. And since I'm a Linux person as well, I'm running Linux Mint on my like workstation, which does everything I need. If I need to go server style, I'm gonna throw up a Debian or Ubuntu and go with that. So I would probably tend to lean toward Remnux if I were getting deep into the malware analysis for me.
Sweet. So I've got Remnux started up and I've opened up a terminal, just a console application, right? And I have a directory that I'll move into just simply called sample. And in this directory, I have one file, and this will kind of be the starting point for the wild rabbit hole that we're about to fall down in this journey we'll embark on here. I've got this file, and it originally, I'm using this to kind of encapsulate and represent how we found this malware. It was a Windows service, like the same way you might start up or programs that would automatically start up on your computer maybe running Skype or maybe running, I don't know, whatever Defender, Windows stuff, services that could run on your computer. Here was one nefarious one. It
Yes.
had this name.
I was gonna say it's got a very interesting looking name you got going on there,
Yeah,
John. Maybe that was
yeah,
your first IOC right there.
it totally was. It
Yeah.
absolutely was. Oftentimes you'll see low hanging fruit, in all honesty. It's like, hey, sometimes it's just a randomly generated string or randomly generated data. So bad guys can spray and pray, this sort of thing, across a lot of different
Now,
endpoints.
and is
But
that also done to kind of like maybe circumvent antivirus malware detection systems that are looking for common malware names?
yes, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into like signature based detection and some of those automated solutions trying to stop things. And I think that actually works as a really good segue because we want to know what command or what program, what would this service actually do? So I'll go ahead and display out the contents of how I had saved that service here. And it's this thing. Um,
Looks like
so it looks
PowerShell.
like yeah, it's a little bit of a blob though, right? You got a whole lot of like text just jammed in one line here.
Yes, I
But
would
if I
say
were
it's
to
like a
work,
one-liner, right?
yeah, yeah. I'm going to work with a text editor that I tend to like. Personally, I use Sublime Text. Anyone is obviously welcome to use whatever they'd like. I don't know if we want to start
A
any
religious
Vim or
war.
Emacs wars.
Yeah.
But taking a look at this, we're doing some weird stuff. And I'll turn word wrap on so you can see this whole line here. But then we'll kind of start to segment this out so we can make sense of it. Have you seen this com spec representation
No,
before?
that was actually like probably the first thing I was like, I wonder what that com spec thing is, and I'm glad you brought that up because everything else looks pretty like something I've seen. It's definitely that web client download string. That's definitely something I've worked with and done before to create fileless type malware living off the LAN technique. So what are we working with this com spec business?
So I will tangent right back to our Windows world. I have PowerShell open over here, and you might be working with variables that you could have set to any value in. Oops, sorry, that should be a string. The demo gods working with us, right? Trying to do stuff live. You know, you got to think on your feet. Variables can be stored in PowerShell with that sort of $ syntax. But if you go back to the old school DOS days, right? The command prompt, that big spooky black box here, that might display out variables with percent signs surrounding the name. Spec is one variable that just happens to refer to cmd.exe on its own for the command prompt. I think we could view this with set. Yeah, set will go ahead and display out all of the variables that might already be set. And you can see ComSpec right here. Its default value is the command prompt. So it could be invoked just taking its representation right here.
That's interesting stuff. So it's kind of like when you do an env in Linux, you get to see all those environmental variables and what they're all set to. Same kind of thing, just in a Windows world.
Absolutely. CMD with a /c argument, that's actually going to end up giving it a command or something to just run as part of its arguments or parameters. So it's going to invoke more code. And interestingly enough, it calls CMD to call CMD again to then call PowerShell. PowerShell starts with no profile. That's that argument there. Non-interactive and a window style, that capital W for hidden. So hey, we're not going to show you the window. You're not going to see any of this is happening.
You don't
It's
need the
hiding.
old window, John. It's useless. Just trust us.
But then the string that follows will be the actual legitimate PowerShell code that might run. We could maybe nerf this out for a bit, and I'll make sure that I'm looking at this in the PowerShell representation. We look like we're going to end up maybe getting a certificate validation thing. I don't know if we're going to end up doing HTTPS or TLS things maybe later on, but we have an if statement that will just simply check if the operating system architecture contains the string 64. What do you think that might be doing?
It's looking to see if it's 64-bit architecture or 32-bit. Yeah.
For sure. That one's pretty okay, pretty easy for
Yeah.
us. I'm trying to break out this logic where I am making new lines after semicolons, or I'm making new lines after an opening curly brace to indicate there's a new logic branch. But then we get to some other peculiar stuff. If I were to keep cleaning this, have you seen that IEX thing before?
Yeah, that's like the invoke expression kind of idea that's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the application over here in Windows, again, if I were to check out PowerShell, I'll clear the screen. You have IEX as a command that you could run, but invoke expression is really what that's going to end up calling back to. And now that's a commandlet, right? That's a PowerShell commandlet. So you could see that if you were to call any other commandlet, like get execution policy, set execution policy. Those are pretty long form. So PowerShell has nicknames or convenience functions, right? You could work with an alias. We could simply get alias and see all of the defined aliases that we have set on this computer. One of this is IEX or invoke expression. And invoke expression can be a little dangerous, right? Have you
Dangerous.
seen that one?
Expound on what you mean by dangerous,
So
if you would.
I'll give a super duper simple solution or one example here. Let's say we had a string for calc.exe, just maybe to run the calculator program. If I were to hit enter on that, PowerShell will return the string value wrapped in quotes. But what if we were to try and IEX that calc.exe? It'll go ahead and pop up a calculator. It interprets a string as if it were legitimate code now to execute and evaluate and run. That gives the bad guys a little bit more flexibility because they could break this up. They could say, ooh, let's run calc where we're spreading out the letters or the variables or anything that we might be able to use. It might still pop it up. And I think I'll have to bundle all that together. And then maybe you could hide some of these with ASCII representations. Like what is the character representation of the letter C? I think that's 65, 67. I don't character array of 67 will give us the letter C. So maybe we could hide and obfuscate this even more. So that's 67 and replace the other C with 67. You'll still get that same code to execute.
That's kind of cool. Like the fact that you're using something very simplistic, honestly, to just hide what it is you're trying to do, and then that kind of forces the interpreter there to build all this in memory and put it together, so it's not actually sitting on the disk as something malicious per se, right?
Exactly. That's the whole concept behind the buzzword fileless malware, you know?
Yeah.
When you're running things like invoke expression or passing things strictly through arguments or running an eval statement or an execute statement, if it's going to never touch disk, well, you get kind of close to that fileless malware idea.
Yeah, and it works really well.
Well, hey, we're avoiding the white elephant in the room.
You mean that
I'm sure
download string? Yeah.
yeah, there's some weird IP addresses there. If we really wanted to, we could toss this into Shodan, Shodan.io, or check it out online. See where is this IP address coming from? Where in the world is it? Some potentially different country than we are. And what is it getting here on this port 8000? That just looks strange and sketchy. Looks like it'll determine if it's a 64-bit architecture or a 32-bit architecture and get the appropriate payload following it. So let's see if we could do the exact same thing. Could we copy and paste this code
We sure can
and
try.
see? Yeah, maybe out there on the internet, this thing's still live.
You know what I've learned doing this for the last few years is you can try. Worst that can happen is it doesn't do what you think it's going to do, right? But it may do something neat.
So you could, if you really wanted to, open up your own web browser and just slap in that address and go to it.
In your sandbox.
Yes, absolutely. You don't have to. You shouldn't. You
No.
don't.
And there
Using it in your web browser
are
will
online
allow
sandboxes as well, though, right? I could
Yes,
I could use
exactly.
that. Yeah.
Any.run or others could do the same thing. You could do like some URL screenshots to have
Yeah.
something else connect to it for you. The danger that I was going to mention is that if you do this with your own legitimate web browser, it could execute JavaScript or client-side code that might drive your browser to go do things that you never wanted it to do. Uh, so I'm going to end up just curling this down to see if it still exists, see if I can still reach it. I'll paste that address in, and I'm not going to be executing PowerShell when I do this, right? Uh, just using curl will simply request the contents, and we knew from our previous analysis that PowerShell is the thing that would expect data from this. So let me just see. We'll cross our fingers and see if this thing is still live. I'll hit enter here, and it's still live.
Yeah, something come back. Oh my goodness, that
In
is
fact,
a lot
a
of
lot.
base 64.
Well, hey, I hope I'm not crushing your bit rate here, guys. Thanks for letting me come on the show.
Yeah, here's 2 gigs of base 64. Good luck.
So I have previously saved this, and I will work with this so we can kind of take a look. What is our 64-bit payload? We know it's going to be PowerShell, so we'll use that .ps1 extension, and we'll take a look. I don't have word wrap on right now, or so it's going to be that long horizontal display of all this. But as you mentioned, it's a whole lot of base 64. What is base 64, Daniel? Can you fill me in?
So this is an encoding mechanism that's used to just kind of either push things together, make it nice and easy to send as a chunk, or to obfuscate. At least that's been what I've seen in my experience. And especially with this kind of stuff, base 64. I love how people think base 64 is some sort of encryption. So they're, oh, we've got this safe. I'll put passwords in base 64. That's a bad idea. So don't do that, because as I'm sure John's about to show us, it's not real difficult to turn this back into like human readable stuff.
Right. We're looking at obfuscated code. Super duper unintelligible. It looks like complete gibberish. It looks like nonsense. But we're smarty pants, right?
Yeah.
We're some security professionals. So if we were to take a step back, look through some of this, we saw after all of this junk in base 64, there was one other line that I noticed started with IEX, or that invoke expression yet again. I'll turn word wrap off so we don't have to hunt for it. But
Oh,
if
there it is. Yeah.
IEX were to be expecting more PowerShell code to evaluate, that means that what follows this has to eventually be decoded or decrypted or deobfuscated and unraveled to be more PowerShell code.
And correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I'm looking at your IEX and it's of mixed case, which is another obfuscation technique, because PowerShell doesn't care about case so much. So you can kind of throw things like that, and then any of your signature detection will go, oh, I don't know what that is.
You're totally right. If you're looking at some barebone baby basics, maybe automated AV or EDR solution, if for whatever reason it's only looking for static case sensitive strings, some bad actors might have some tricks up their sleeve and using random letters uppercase for commandlets or things. Sometimes they might throw in backticks or the escape character sequence in PowerShell, because again, that it doesn't care. They're just abusing the ins and outs of the language that they're happen to be working in.
Have you ever messed with the PowerShell obfuscator command line tool? That thing is crazy. It spits out some insane looking PowerShell.
I absolutely agree. And we see even more digging through malware.
Yeah, no doubt.
So now that we know that this could be another payload or another stage of more code that gets evaluated and executed, let's kind of take an inventory of ourselves here, knowing IEX would run more things, but it would evaluate it. Let's nerf that IEX so it's not actually going to detonate the rest of this code, but let's just display it out on the screen with a commandlet like write host. So we might be able to have that all returned back out to us. What's the next layer of code? What's the next thing that this is going to do?
Nice. That's a really cool technique, because like you say, it allows me to see what that's going to be without actually having to execute it. Because we want to move in safety stages, right? Once we've cleared this room, then we can move to the next, right?
Absolutely. And this is one of the beautiful things about working with scripting languages like this for that sort of malware analysis, because all of this junk, no matter what it was, no matter how much of it there was, no matter all the obfuscation techniques that it might use, we can totally ignore it, because if we know, hey, it's going to execute something else, let's go find out, just swapping out the detonator with what this might actually display. So bear with me.
Oh, no.
Crossing our fingers here.
We're with bated breath, sir.
Let's run the malware that we just nerfed.
You're a wild man, you crazy person, you.
I'll slap this into PowerShell. Maybe it will yell at me. Additional non-parsable characters at the end of the string.
That's how you know it's PowerShell, that when you get the red text first.
Right. Try that one last time. I don't know. Did I end up removing anything extra there? I don't think so.
I don't think so. Good news is you could just re-download it, right?
You're totally right. Maybe it's doing some weirdness if I have Unicode endings there. Let's try that. Still no.
Yep. Hey, welcome to live malware.
Live
yes, that's right. This is how this works. But you know what, though? I think that people really appreciate this kind of stuff, that here you are a professional, you do this all the time, and you still run into these basic, like, oh my goodness, what have I done? What's the weird little thing I'm forgetting to do? We're not perfect. It's something you do this every day. So it makes us feel better. And our imposter syndrome goes down just a little bit.
It wouldn't be a live presentation if we didn't mess up somewhere. So let me try and piecemeal this. Let's slap in all of that horrific code into its own PowerShell prompt, and let's see if that will be displayed or cleaned out easily. And I'm still not pulling it together. Maybe toString isn't going to work well for us. So let's play pretend over in the Windows world. Maybe this is a horrific idea too.
Yeah, but hey, whatever, right? You only live once. This is where John's career took a tank, right? And left you.
Wouldn't be fun without it.
No. Keeps it interesting, right?
There we go. Okay, so that's going to display a ton of stuff.
Was it just not liking the Linux PowerShell environment?
Yes, in some cases.
Gotcha.
I have seen that before in many times. Where did I end up saving this? Just to kind of disc jockey on my feet here. This is in desktop testing. So I'll open up a new PowerShell window. And yeah, because you're using the cross-platform PowerShell when you're working in Linux, some specific things it doesn't exactly want to work with.
Well, good to know. It lets you know that you got to be running, you got to make sure you have a Windows box and a Linux box. We both kind of have let the cat out of the bag that we are Linux people, but I understand the necessity to have a Windows machine laying around for just such occasions.
So let me do some quick magic by trying to save the output of all this, because it looked like it was storing it all with new lines. If I were to actually take a look at what this next.ps1 that I've just stored this out to be, maybe I could slap that into Sublime Text and kind of peel that next layer out. Turn regular expressions on. And fingers crossed if PowerShell will actually save this. So now we got something new, and maybe we could call this stage 2 or stage 3 or wherever you are mentally here. We could try and deobfuscate all of this yet again, and we actually could see some really interesting stuff. Hello.
Yeah, it actually has some PowerShell in there, or at least it looks like it.
Yeah. I see one spooky thing here. This PS Home 4, PS Home 30, and X, right?
Hey, could you make that a little bit bigger for us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because, oh, there we go. Yeah, it looks good. So is that like a, where it's like indexing, like something? Is that what I'm looking at?
So remember how I mentioned that some variables in PowerShell could very well just be represented with that $sign?
Yes.
Turns out PS Home is just going to refer to the representation of PowerShell, but if it's indexed at the number 4, we get the letter I.
Interesting.
And if it's indexed at the number 30, it's the letter E.
And then it added an X on the end. So we've got another little lovely way to embezzle another IEX into this business, huh?
Yes, yes, doing
Nice.
some more IEX. So if I were to replace what would have called that IEX, maybe we could go ahead and use some right host, just as we kind of replaced and swapped that earlier. I don't know if there's another individual kind of in the Zoom segment that I'm in, but I do have some other extra voices in my head.
That's just your craziness, John.
Yeah, yeah.
No one hears
As
that
I'm
but you, buddy.
working with some malware. So I'll see if we could work with that stage too that we've just cleaned up. Maybe I have lost a parentheses that I needed. There
There
we
we
go.
go.
This gets me a whole nother layer. And bear with me. Now let's try and clean this because it's starting to look like relatively readable code.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
going to
definitely.
replace every semicolon with a semicolon and a new line. And then we could start to kind of slowly see, are there other functions or other things that this might do? You can see some really sketchy commands in there, like get MP preference or set MP preference. Do you know what those
No,
might be?
I was about to ask you that very question. I'm like, okay, I'm not familiar with MP preference, get or set. So help us out. What are we talking about with MP preference?
That is controlling the Windows Defender antivirus and firewall.
Oh, you don't
So
say.
it might be trying to add some exclusion processes to what this program is, like always allowing itself to run. A little
Well,
sketchy.
that makes
Adding an
sense. It's
exclusion
like
for
Congress
itself.
voting on its own raise. You know, should we get a raise? I think we've done great. I sure think we should have that raise. Ah, all in favor? Aye. The ayes have it. Motion passed. Yeah. So it's basically doing the same thing here, just saying I am safe.
Oh yeah. And this gets messy pretty quick.
Oh yeah, look at this is crazy.
I'm not doing a good job kind of on the fly, maybe deobfuscating and cleaning this stuff up, but you can see some other strange domains and IP addresses in here. We could maybe work and curl with them to see if there are other indicators of compromise, or we could end up pulling out what sort of things it might end up using. Because I see other variables being defined here, like MON
Hmm.
or FUNS
And
or
well,
MONS. And they're actually
FA.
taking substrings of this FA variable. But did you see the FA variable ever defined
I
in
did
this thing?
not. So it must be obfuscated somewhere up in there. Or is it pulling it
Well,
from somewhere else?
if we think back to our old original payload here, we've got that FA string way up here.
So because we've been kind of breaking it out into different sections, we're not seeing it in what are we on stage 3 at this point? So
Maybe.
right, so yeah. So this stage had that, and if it's calling this code and bringing it in, then that FA is there, and it can use that from there. Gotcha.
Yep. Invoke expression, when it would have been called to execute all these next stages of code, it's still going to maintain the context of the code that ran previously. So because this variable was declared, all that base 64 data, well, what does stage 3 do with it? Looks like it tries to reload something, and that's a function that's ended up being defined up top. I thought I saw. You can see that here. Super messy, right?
Super messy, yeah. I think that's one of the things I love watching you do with deobfuscating this code is how well you do a good job of not only like taking very crazily named variables and giving them some true meaning so that anybody looking at it after the fact would be, oh, this totally makes sense, but also cleaning it up, giving us something that's a lot more human readable.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's definitely very cool. Um, I don't know how much time we're gonna end up having to light off the rest of these fireworks,
All right.
and because I was, kind of a little spastic and working through this, but you'll see more and more PowerShell code, and I'll see actually if you don't mind bearing with me.
Not at all. I
Let me.
think everybody is happy to give you as much moments as you need to give us the next cool thing you're going to throw up on the screen there. So,
Let's see if I could find some of this old original ones. That looks a bit better. If I mark that PowerShell. So this is a cleaned representation of some of that code that we had found previously. We have our FA variable. We have the reload function that we might have seen previously. Decom was another one that looked like it was just going to decompress some base64. And then we have Mimi and MON and funds and all these other things. So let's play with these, if that's okay with you.
You try to stop me. I can't wait to see what you got going on here.
Hop over back into my usual Ubuntu world because I'm just trying to be out of my comfort zone for the webinar. Maybe not have been the best move.
Hey, it was a valiant effort, sir.
I wanted to drive the point home. You guys should be totally playing with Remnux or Flare VM or things that you know would work well for using the tools for this. I'll bring this into the temporary directory so I can work with it in PowerShell. PowerShell. And let's see if I can run this code, if it will behave for me. If not, I want to be able to try and pull out and carve out the same way that it takes a substring of those strange variables like FA and MON and all those others here. If this doesn't pull together, I'll carry us to the end of the story where we can take a look at what more of these things are. Let me echo, or let's check the variables that we have. Nope, not going to want to work with that easily for me. Totally fine. I had carved out those strange variable names that looked like it was taking substrings or portions of that FA variable, the big long base 64.
Right.
If I were to take a look at what some of those were, funds is a strange one. That's more text, but this is actually PowerShell.
Okay.
And it's surprisingly readable PowerShell.
Yeah.
I don't know if you see a couple functions in here like get win32 types.
Yes, there it is.
There's a lot of stuff in here.
Wow. Wow.
Get win32 constants or win32 functions. These are actually using PowerShell syntax to reflectively load up the potential to pull in other win32 API calls, stuff that might be in DLLs like kernel32.dll or calling other functions that are closer to the operating system. So it can allocate memory, it can copy memory streams into a buffer, execute that memory as if it were running shellcode, lots of other super dangerous stuff.
So is it making these or references or copies maybe even so that it can run without being detected by the operating system or not having access into that when it actually runs?
Absolutely. And if we were to scroll through and look through a lot more of this code, this looks super familiar to something that you might find in other PowerShell utilities or frameworks like PowerSploit or PowerUp.
Gotcha.
Or
was it Nishang?
They have a lot of PowerPick, the whole family that's doing offensive stuff with PowerShell. And eventually this is actually going to end up being a representation of using the Eternal Blue exploit.
Oh, there it is again. I always love when people
implemented in PowerShell.
That is awesome. I love when people are like, Eternal Blue's old, we ain't gonna worry about that anymore. Sure you don't. Keep telling yourself that.
Needless to say, we're scrolling down to like what, line 1300. If I bring this all the way down, we're at 8700. And we could see kind of the original commands that might have been created for adding persistence or creating this original malware implant or what we found for our backdoor to begin with. That's just that FUNs. And there's a snippet of Eternal Blue in there. So let me give you that breadcrumb. We also had those weird ones like Mimi, but that's an executable.
Yeah. I'm thinking my head goes straight to Mimikatz.
Yeah.
Right?
So I agree with you on that one.
So I agree. I like that. Yeah, because Mimi's kind of a very unique name that only usually gets associated with having cats at the end of it. in the Windows world, at least in my experience.
So because we were able to carve through all these pieces, because we were able to find that data that it would have extracted and pulled out in base 64, now we literally have executable files and more PowerShell code that seemingly is Mimi as a real legitimate program, MONS and MON, an executable file. Because we have executable files, we could try and maybe spit that into VirusTotal. If VirusTotal will return back for me, we'll see. Let me actually copy all those back to temp in case it whines. Let's
Right.
try see what Mimi is. I don't know if you can see that A-okay.
Yeah, a little bit bigger would be good.
Sure thing.
Oh yeah, there we
So
go.
this is pretty well hidden, right? If VirusTotal is thinking, oh, we're only getting 2 hits out of 63, but it might be Mimikatz,
Yeah, because as it says, Mimikatz.
we could do a little bit more detective work, whether it's running like strings on it or floss or trying to examine that in debugger. If you end up doing that for Mimi, you do see some strange stuff. I think you'll see the Win API for encryption functions.
Hmm.
I don't know if we'll actually get a legitimate value for Mimikatz in here. I don't know if it'll actually display it.
Oh, there
Oh,
it
there it
is.
is.
Well, there you go. Hiding in plain
And
sight.
that's not to say that this is like an immaculate diagnosis. We are just checking out strings, but it gives us the idea.
Right, and because when
I
you're
could do the
when you're
same
doing this
thing.
stuff, you're basically trying to tell the story of what it does and how it does it, and the things that are surrounding it, right?
Yeah, and if you couldn't tell just by kind of me working through all this, this is extremely exploratory.
Yeah.
This is all discovery based. I don't know where I'm going. We don't know where we're going to end up. It's just kind of bumping around in the dark, but trying to make sense of things. And maybe that's why this is so fun.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
my opinion.
It's a puzzle, right? And I think that's what people in cybersecurity are all about. We love solving puzzles, and we'll stay up days at a time without eat, sleep, or drink. Just trying to figure out what's going on here. And what's funny is, like, with this one, at least, I know there's much deeper things, like you said, with compiled binaries that you have to dig into with something like Ghidra or ITPro or something. But just a few good security concepts and skills and techniques could get you down the road of doing some basic malware analysis.
Definitely. Let me wrap this up super
Yeah,
duper
let's
quick.
do it. Let's finish
'Cause,
this up.
I know we got a ton of questions in the queue. It seemed like so. Hey, checking out VirusTotal for those other strange files, this MON or the MONS. Again, really low detection rate, 5 out of 63. But there is a thought, maybe, that this is a coin miner. And now that I think of the name MON, part of me thinks, oh, is that Monero? Like the cryptocurrency
Hmm.
Monero? Is that legitimately going to kickstart Monero or start mining things with XMR rig, etc.? Weird, peculiar. If we were to dig through the other files and look more into that PowerShell code that we kind of had to speed run, turns out it kickstarts those programs and changes your power settings with the power config command to get you into like never hibernate mode or never let your computer go to sleep. So you just have to have the thought: is this going to mine cryptocurrency? And does it use eternal blue to maybe spread and persist? So I thought, hey, let's do my homework. Let's just simply Google malware, crypto miner, eternal blue. Let's see if this is like a known thing. Digging around, we could see that there are a couple articles or some research already out on this thing. One really good one is, hey, maybe this is WannaMine, and that does exactly what we've been thinking here.
So we've profiled this malware now. Now we're trying to see if that profile fits any known malware.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I like to look for telltales or strings or variables that are different and that might be something unique to an application. So I could key off of that and search for it. And that's what led me to find maybe this is WannaMine. And actually looking at their analysis, they have kind of the same PowerShell code that we started with all along. So I have to think this could very well be one of mine.
Right. If it's walking like a duck and quacking like a duck, it's probably a duck there, John. I feel like we're doing like an episode of Criminal Minds with less blood.
That's why it's so much fun.
Yeah. No one died. That's just great.
Cool. I've been yapping for a long time, and I know we have a ton of questions that we want to get through. So I hope that's a decent resolution. All the way digging through those stages, digging through those other binaries we might pull out. This all turned out to be one of mine, a cryptocurrency miner that would persist and spread with eternal blue.
Oh man, this was so much fun. I thoroughly enjoyed this. This is the kind of thing I live for. Like I said, I love watching you do this on your YouTube channel. It's just captivating to see you work through this stuff and take those, obviously you show your experience and everything when you're looking at very strange domain names and even identifying them as domains because they got the colon and a port number after that, and seeing, and putting the pieces together. And just, if you know this stuff, even to some extent, you get some scripting under your belt, you understand some PowerShell, you understand how web works to some extent, a little bit about different types of exploits that are out there, you could probably piece some of this together yourself. Again, go playing around with something from the zoo or the bazaar could be great as a first step into being a malware analyst, I guess. Is that what you call yourself, John? A malware analyst?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's close to
I like it. I like it.
a detective. I don't know.
Yeah, you are a detective. Good job, Detective John. We appreciate you. But like you said, I know we got a lot of people in the chat room, so let's give it over to PVR and see what he has got for us.
Yeah, John took the malware. I took a long time to write, and he just tore it apart there. But
Like it was nothing.
yeah. Anyway, everyone that does ask a question is entered to win an ITProTV T-shirt, much like this one. So there's still time. You can still put those in, and I have a feeling we'll be going to overtime to answer the rest of them. But our first one is actually a fun one I wanted to ask. It's from James watching on the on-air page. He says, "Has John ever accidentally infected his production machine?"
So I can't say production machine. I have definitely executed something kind of in a virtual machine when I wasn't meaning to or intending to. You'll notice as we were kind of doing the showcase here, there are a lot of different places to hide IEX, just as an example, or invoke expression in the PowerShell realm. There's plenty more in Visual Basic Script or JScript or even other things. If you just had a ransomware sample and you're like, does this actually detonate ransomware? What if does it only contain in a folder or whatever? And I'll admit, I'd like to see what happens. So sometimes maybe I'll miss removing one IEX and I won't get the whole thing defanged. And yeah, it'll blow up. But that's why you use virtual machines. You can revert to that snapshot.
I remember the first time somebody came to me with a crypto locked machine and they're like, something's going on with this. Can you take a look? And I saw the locks and I go, I don't know what's going on, but it doesn't look good. Unless you've got some sort of cryptographic key to unlock these things, this is gone.
It's bad.
Yeah, no bueno.
Are you ready for our next one? We've got a question from Umair in Saudi Arabia, actually, and they ask, how would you value the use of obsolete scripting or programming languages in creating a malware from a malware analyst's perspective?
Ooh, I'm trying to wrap my mind around that. I'm trying to think, does that kind of ask more from like a malware development perspective, like writing the nefarious bad code to then later be analyzed?
Well, I'm thinking maybe if it's written in obsolete code, that it's harder for someone like you to take a look at it.
Yes. Yeah. Obviously, and as we've seen with obfuscation, if you do anything that is esoteric or just unintelligible or nonsense or clever tricks or different things up your sleeve that you might be able to use, that's harder sometimes to work through if you're doing some malware analysis, because you've got to figure that out. You've got to learn that puzzle. I've noticed a trend, I think, in that some newer samples are oftentimes in Golang, or the Go programming language. Rust is another one if you're hipster like that. Go is like extremely hard to reverse engineer or work with, and even antivirus products, AV and EDR, like trip over it because they struggle with trying to understand what this thing is and how to make sense of it. So using innovative, different things, the new stuff that isn't always the easy, what we're used to with the low hanging fruit from hackers. That's certainly harder to dissect from an analysis perspective.
All right, that makes sense. All right, next up, we've got Bernardo in Mexico City asks, do I need a programming background to start dissecting malware?
Oh, Daniel, man, normally when we get to this sort of question, we're like, no, you don't need to.
Yeah. I feel
It
like this is
helps.
one where you go, nah, dog, you need some programming to get into this.
Yeah,
I mean, because especially if you're doing precompiled binaries and you're doing reverse engineering, that is going to be complete voodoo and witchcraft to anybody that knows nothing
right.
about programming. So I would, I mean, even with some scripting stuff here, the reversing and understanding how it should be structured and what's going to happen with that, like those for me with some unknown variable items there, I would have had to figure that out. I mean, Google's your friend, don't get me wrong, but at least having some fundamental knowledge around programming seems almost like um, it's the price of entry here.
I would agree. I would absolutely agree. I think it just helps you understand what is happening and why. One clever trick that I had seen, and some programming nerds might laugh at this. There were some malware stages in other languages that would try to run some code, and I mean that literally in like a try block,
Oh,
a try catch or
yep,
a try and accept. So inside of the accept block, uh, that's where they would have their legitimate code that they wanted to run. But inside of the try block, they would put nonsense, absolute gibberish. It looked like legitimate code that would run, but it would error and purposefully fall down into the accept block so that the intended and purposeful code would run. But they were able to add so much noise and make a whole like whirlwind and storm because they hid in the try block.
yeah.
And if you didn't know that concept in programming, you would be like, what WTF is this? Just even having that insight, oh, try and accept, I know where this logic will go. That is something that I do think is necessary.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like going back to almost the same exact idea that these people that are writing this stuff are putting these rabbit trails of code in there, and if you can't figure out that that's exactly what it is, then you're going to be stuck looking through that stuff, going trying to figure out what it does, and it's going to eat a lot of time, just giving them more time to do whatever it is that they're doing.
Good point.
All right, sounds like a little programming knowledge can't hurt, definitely, and can only help. So next up we have MacGyver, I want to say, in Fort Worth asks, what path would you recommend to become a malware analyst? So I assume we're talking about like what training, what certifications you might want to start with.
Yeah. Oh goodness. I'll have to add the disclaimer. I'll have to add the note. My path will certainly be very different for anyone else. It's not the way. It's what I went through, but it's not to say that would work for everyone. It's not a 1,000% guaranteed one size fits all thing. Um, I always harken back to it, and Daniel, maybe you'll hate me for this or you'll love me. I don't know. Uh, Capture the flag.
Yeah.
That's how I got my chops. That's how I got any skills. It's the trial and error, the perseverance, the dedication to work through new problems and gain exposure to new technology, new languages, new code, new techniques. Capture the flag is how I learned because it just throws so much at you, and you can become a little bit more well-rounded, in my
You
opinion.
know what else I like about Capture the Flag is it teaches you, personal persistence, tenacity, right? That never give up, never surrender attitude of, okay, I have no idea what the heck is going on here, and maybe I got to go read a walkthrough, or maybe I got to Google the mess out of some technology I'm just not familiar with. But that's how you get familiar with those things, and the more experience you get, which the CTFs are giving you the kind of the roadmap to gain that experience, if not directly, indirectly, then the better, right? You're going to just be better for the siege, really. Yeah, is it frustrating? Absolutely. A friend of mine said you got to be willing to get punched in the face like 99 times so that you can deliver that one knockout blow to the machine. If you can't handle that, then this ain't the game for you. If you can, it's exhilarating. It's so much fun. You get really smart. You have a lot of cool skills that you can make money with and enjoy your job. So I really like CTFs. I would say that they're just one of the best tools out there for us.
I wish I could give you like a precise, specific, accurate certification or some
Mm.
other industry training that would offer this sort of thing. But it's a weird niche, right? It's hard to find something that hits this nail on the head. Um, one great resource I guess I would recommend, because I've recently started to play with it, the Blue Team Labs online. Some of their challenges, blueteamlabs.online, have some really neat stuff, like going through Emotet one malware sample and kind of carving out the same way we just did. If you're interested, that might be something to take a look at, blueteamlabs.online.
Well, it sounds like an opportunity, John, for you to create your own malware dissection certification. So we'll get you on that. We have a question
Appreciate
from yeah, we have a question from Jason, the on-air page. They say, what percentage of malware would you say is in some kind of scripting language like Bash, Python, VBA, etc., versus a compiled piece of malware? Have there been any trends in one direction or the other?
Yes. Um, I don't know if I'd be able to give an exact percentage. Maybe 40, 60. It's got to be close to 50, 50, or maybe I think it fluctuates, right? It goes kind of with the times as to what people are using on their computers. Um, Using a scripting language might weaken the malware, because anyone that can make sense of that can understand it. Like, we're not, in the previous presentation, I wasn't digging through assembly opcodes and trying to follow through control flow and ITPro. Uh, Maybe that's not pure reverse engineering in some strange way, but using those scripting languages gives you more power because it's natively installed on the machine in Windows, WScript, CScript, etc. And you can do those things like invoke expression or exec and eval, and you can bundle and wrap up like an onion full of payloads, like a matryoshka doll. Just as we saw, we're working through stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. I have gone up to like stage 8 or 9 in some things, and it's like, wow, this is just a labyrinth. Compiled pieces of malware, it works. It'll do it, but then you've got significantly more uh, restrictions when you've got an antivirus product or an EDR thing, like even Virus Total as an example. They've got things that it could kind of take a look at and work with. Any trends in one direction or another? I think we are moving more and more into using those scripting languages, living off the land techniques, so that they've got fileless malware and they can obfuscate to like their heart's content. They can slip past prevention, automated security systems. That maybe that's the way that the world's going to end up going more for malware.
Don, it just makes sense to me because, like you say, with a scripting language, you can change, you can move. It's much more agile than if you have a compiled program that does X, Y, or Z. Maybe it's very successful at that, but as soon as it's burned, right now you've got to recode it, recompile it, because engines are going to pick it up, and that's a whole lot more difficult to do than if you just had a scripting language and make a change and send it back out on its way.
Yeah.
All right. We had a great comment I just want to read real quick from Raquel. It says, not a question, but just wanted to thank you all for this awesome webinar. It changed my view today and helped with my current project of switching careers. So that's awesome.
Excellent.
But the next
Thanks so
question,
much.
yeah. John, you mentioned sandboxing earlier, and Eric A wants to know, would a sandbox machine be a physically air-gapped machine, or would a simple VM suffice?
Mm. That is totally up to your tolerance of risk, I guess. Like, you can be, as pessimistic and cynical and paranoid as you want to be, if you want to go, hey, some air gap machine that isn't off in some like Tesla coil room. I don't know. uh, Personally, I tend to use a simple virtual machine. When I need to, I'll toggle that uh, the virtual machine's network adapter, because some malware can, if you were to just simply enable or disable the adapter within the guest of the virtual machine, some malware can track that down and just turn it right back on. So using the physical, quote unquote, hardware for the virtual machine, disabling that is what I tend to do when I'm actually spooked and I don't want this thing calling out to some command and control C2 server. So I use a virtual machine, but again, you are welcome to set up your own lab however you'd like.
All right, fantastic. We had one from Dan, and a few other people actually asked the same question in the on-air page. What are some good books, white papers, or sites that discuss how to dissect malware?
Oh, crap.
Isn't there a dissecting malware book? I want to say
You
there
know,
is. Is it a No Starch Press book or I want to say there
I'm sure
is.
there is. I'm sure there is probably from No Starch
It
Press.
has like an alien. It looks like an alien autopsy
Yeah.
table on the cover, if I'm not mistaken. Might be a.
Practical malware analysis,
Is
I
that
think is
what
the
it
one that
is?
you're thinking of.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
that's
yeah.
it.
That is an alien on the operating table. Googling it right
There
now.
you go. Right, Google's our friend.
I don't know if that's an endorsement of that book or not, but
Yeah.
any others you wanted to share?
Uh, Honestly, a lot of it is threat hunting and
Hmm.
blue teaming and just defense in every aspect. Because if you're looking at security mitigations and security protections, those are the things that malware is going to try and bypass and circumvent and work around. So even if it's just a simple like system administration in a Windows environment, that can still be helpful. It's worthy to know. I don't know if I'd be able to give you an exact specific thing for the sole tasking of malware analysis, but it all accumulates, it all grows, and it stockpiles, just as everything we do in tech.
You can probably go to John's YouTube channel and get a lot of that as well. He's being humble. So, yeah, check out John Hammond on YouTube. But everybody, stay tuned as we're going to announce the winner of the IT Pro TV t-shirt in just a moment. And if we couldn't get to your question during the webinar, don't worry. Daniel and John will be answering them in overtime on the IT Pro TV on-air page after this webinar. I'll explain more about that in just a moment. All right, you can check out a free membership of ITProTV with no credit card required, with access to select courses and our daily live feed. You can also get a full personal membership that provides complete access to all the ITProTV courses with or without practice exams and virtual labs. If you're on a team, you'll want to check out the business page, which offers a tour of the Pro Portal used to maximize your team's investment in training. Don't forget to enter the promo code Webinar30 when you sign up for an ITProTV membership to get 30% off the lifetime of your personal membership. All right, now for the winner of an IT Pro TV t-shirt, it looks like the winner is Luke, who is watching from Greenville, South Carolina. So congratulations, Luke, and someone will reach out to you. So don't put your info in the chat here, but we'll reach out and get your information so we can get a shirt out to you. All right, well, we've run out of time for this webinar, but we still have some more questions from you that we'd love to answer. So we're going to go into overtime on the IT Pro TV on-air page to continue answering those questions, but this is only for IT Pro TV members. Now, you can become a member today for no cost by signing up for a free membership now. One of our team members will put the link in the chat for you, and it's quick and simple. So we'll take about a 5-minute break to give you some time to sign up there, and we'll see you in overtime.
Thank you for joining us today. You will receive a link to a recording of the webinar delivered to your inbox. Remember that coupon code is Webinar30. See you back here for the next IT Pro TV webinar.